Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you a further update as I come towards the conclusion of my review period with the new Sony a7III or a7 Mark III. And as you've seen in previous episodes, we've talked about the differences in the build and the design of these two most recent cameras from Sony, including the a7R Mark III, which I own one of myself, and so I've had it here as a benchmark throughout this time. We've looked at some of the sensor performance when it comes to aspects like, the high ISO performance. We've looked at dynamic range. And certainly if you're interested in the sensor aspects, I would encourage you to take a look at those videos. Today I'm here to break down the autofocus performance of this camera and how it compares and contrasts to that of the Sony a7R Mark III. And so just before I do that, however, I do want to give you an update on just another aspect of the camera performance, and that is that traditionally battery performance with Sony cameras has been a bit of a issue. For example, I'm filming right now on the Sony a6500, which is an excellent camera in a lot of ways, but the battery life, particularly if you're doing what I'm doing right now, which is shooting 4K video, is abysmal. And so it seems like pretty much every second time that I turn on the camera, the battery is about dead and it needs to be replaced. Sony has addressed that by beginning with the a7R3, or really actually with the a9, and then filtering down to these cameras with a new, much larger capacity battery pack, the NP-FZ100. And while the capacity, it seems like it should only be a certain amount, double at best. In real world performance, it seems to really exceed that. And so I just wanted to give you an update on that, in that I received the a7 III on April 26th, 2018. I have been shooting with it for nearly a month. I've shot 4K video. I've shot well more than 1,000 frames. And so far in this whole month period, I have recharged the battery once, and it currently stands at 74% as of this moment. And so, I charged it the day that I got the camera before using it. And since that point, last week, because I was shooting an event this last weekend, I recharged the battery. And it wasn't yet at 0%, it was somewhere around 20, and so I recharged it just so it would be fresh for this. And after a weekend shooting at this event, it stands at 74%. And of course, with a new camera, that includes all the extra stuff that you do, like reviewing photos and changing settings and just familiarizing yourself with the camera. And so, it's a pretty exceptional thing. So moving on to the autofocus system. Autofocus system, first of all, when I first heard feedback from a few of you, actually, when you were saying that the autofocus system was going to be better in the a7 III than in the a7R Mark III, my first response to that was, there's no way. There's no way that Sony is going to put a better autofocus system in its camera that is 50% cheaper or more than the a7R Mark III. But that turned out to in fact be the case, and while the a7R Mark III inherited a good portion of the a9's excellent autofocus system, the a7 III has inherited most all of it. And so just to give you an idea of how that breaks down, it has 693 phase detect points versus 399 in the a7R Mark III. And so, obviously that's a pretty huge difference, almost an additional 300 phase detect points. And how that breaks down is that in terms of the coverage of the frame, you have a 93% coverage of the frame, which is just incredible with the a7 III, compared to 68% on the a7R Mark III, which, by the way, that's still excellent, but of course not nearly as good as what the a7 III offers. Both of them have 425 contrast detection points, but really it's that phase detect points in most situations that is most important and makes the biggest difference. So how does that play out in the real world? Can you actually tell a difference between these two cameras and the autofocus performance? Well, the short answer is yes, you definitely can. It's not necessarily night and day like the a7R Mark III compared to the a7R Mark II was, but certainly in real world shooting, I can tell a difference. And it could be something so simple as, for example, I was testing tracking, and so shooting a burst. And so, for example, on the a7 III with the Zeiss, Sony Zeiss planar 50mm f1.4, and yeah, after my review period, I like this lens so much that even though it's expensive and it's big, I ended up buying one for myself. And it's actually my first autofocus, full frame FE autofocusing Sony lens that I have. And I probably need to pick up one or two more just so I have a more complete kit and don't always have to use adapted lenses. Anyway, when shooting these side by side, same lighting conditions, just a few minutes apart, same conditions, same settings in the cameras, I found that using native glass, even though, I mean, many of you would say that's not the best autofocus lens out there for testing that, and I'm sure you're absolutely right. It's just the only one that I have. But I saw shooting this running sequence of my son who is in track. He's very fast, moving toward me at high speed. And so I was shooting in high plus, so 10 frames per second. And over the course of that burst period, which was a little over around 8 seconds, I had 82 frames in that burst. And as I went through them one by one, it almost became monotonous because basically all of them were perfectly focused with the a7 III. And so that was a pretty exceptional when you consider that there probably is better autofocusing glass to put on the camera for that kind of scenario. To get that kind of perfect results, I thought spoke very well not only of the camera but of the lens itself, because I don't think that I've ever done that well with a 50mm prime lens before, wide aperture 50mm prime. And by the way, just so you know, I shot that series at f2 on both cameras, and so it was I was shooting with quite a wide aperture. I shot at f2, and so that I wouldn't be up against any kind of lighting limits there. And so anyway, exceptional result there. When I switched over to the a7R Mark III and shot identical settings, I found that a couple of things happened. Number one, I noticed that my buffer filled sooner. And so as a result, while I ended up getting just a few less frames, I actually wasn't able to follow the sequence all the way through. I had some missed shots where there was space where I had to kind of restart shooting again. And so definitely deeper buffer was obvious with the a7 III. The other thing that I noted was that even in that kind of scenario, there were some front and back focuses with the a7R Mark III that I didn't see with the a7 III. And so I got really basically perfect results with the a7 III. With the a7R Mark III, however, I did get some intermittent misses. And so definitely better results with the a7 III. Now, when it comes to real-world shooting results, I've gotten excellent focus results with the a7 III. I mean, it is essentially, it's pretty close to flawless in real-world shooting. I got just excellent, whatever I was throwing on there, whether it was adapted lenses, native lenses, mostly adapted lenses, to be honest. Like I've said, I've got very few other than throwing some APS-C Sony E-mount lenses on there. But results were excellent with that. Now, when it comes to adapted results, I've tried a variety of different adapters throughout the review period, including the Metabones 5th generation, the Sigma MC11, and then also a Velo adapter that I've previously reviewed and that I have on hand. All of them showed improved performance when compared to the a7R Mark III, and just a little bit more focus speed, a little bit more confidence in focusing, less hang-ups, less slowdowns. And so definitely some improvement there. IAF works just a little bit better with all these lenses when compared to the a7R Mark III. Now, when it comes to tracking with adapted lenses, I got some mixed bag results. What I noted, one of the very first things that I did is I threw a combination of the Canon 100-400L Mark II, which I had not gotten amazing results on with the a7R Mark III, and the Sigma MC11, and threw that on the a7 III. My results were encouraging in that for actually going out and shooting, be it birds in flight or just wildlife, I got very, very accurate results. I mean, I was very impressed in that I got, in many ways, better results than what I typically get even shooting on native cameras. And so in terms of the actual mechanism of tracking action, I thought that it was quite excellent. When I was tracking in a panning type pattern, I felt like I got good accuracy, good results there. However, when I switched to that scenario that I just showed you using the native glass with a high-speed runner coming towards me, and that combination, what I was able to see is that in that scenario, continuous autofocus is not keeping up, or I'm not even sure that it's happening. In high plus mode, my first few shots where it was within probably the pre-focused range or the beginning focus range was pretty accurate, but the closer that the subject got, moving out of that zone, I could tell that the autofocus was just not keeping up. It was lagging behind with an adapted lens. And when I switched over to the Velo adapter to see if, I got similar, better, worse results, I got similar focus results, certainly no better, maybe a bit worse, but I also introduced some metering inconsistencies that I didn't see with the Sigma MC11. And so, you're certainly, if you're wanting to shoot very high demanding action, again, as I've said before in my adapter reviews, I think that you're best served by using native glass, where you're getting exceptional results. Of course, the very fact that we're having this discussion is very unique to Sony. It's not like I'm expecting other camera systems to perform well, to autofocus well with non-native lenses. And so the very fact that the autofocus is usable in the majority of situations is, to me, still a huge plus for Sony, and that adapting Canon lenses or EF mount lenses to Sony it's a fairly successful endeavor. However, if you're wanting to shoot, sports or, high demanding wildlife, I do think that you're still best served with native glass. Bottom line is that this is an incredible autofocus system in a $2,000 camera. When I think about how it compares to something like the Canon 6D Mark II, for example, it's not even in the same realm of discussion in terms of the coverage and the number of autofocus points, and above all, the real-world performance. This camera just delivers excellent autofocus results. And I have to tell you, particularly as a lens reviewer, it's fairly refreshing to not have to worry about lens calibration. With so many lenses that flow through my hands, that's just kind of one of the pains as a part of doing what I do. And to not have to worry about that on, just to have a new lens, take it out of the box. Like this past weekend is when I got my own copy of the planar 50mm f1.4. I took it out of the box. I was at an event. I put it on the camera and was shooting within minutes and got beautifully focused results throughout the weekend. That's great, particularly when you're talking about an f1.4 lens. And so, this is a great AF system and it's a great camera. And I'll sum all of that up in my final review and give you a few more observations from real-world performance, what I consider the weaknesses to be, and to sum up the strengths, which are many for this camera. So stay tuned for that. And of course, in the meantime, you can look in the description down below and you can look at the image gallery that I've continued to add to along the way. You can also there find linkages for purchasing one for yourself. Follow me on social media. And of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.